Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be taking another look at the AOKZOE A1. Now if you're not familiar with this is a Ryzen 6800U powered handheld with an 8-inch IPS display. And I've had some more time to spend with this. I've actually created two other videos. We had a first look and some emulation testing. If you're interested in checking those out, I'll leave the links for those videos in the description. And the main reason I wanted to get this video made was because the Kickstarter is now live for the AOKZOE. And in this one, I can give you a little information on the one that I've been messing around with. But keep in mind, this one here is a prototype. It's not the finished unit. But overall, I've been having a really great time with this handheld, and it really comes down to that new APU, the Ryzen 6800U. So overall, huge fan of the screen here. We've got an 8-inch IPS. It does have analog triggers with actually a lot of throw. Makes it really nice to use with racing games. We've also got full-size analog sticks. It's not using the Switch style sticks, but one thing that I'm not a huge fan of is this D-pad itself. Now it does work, I just don't like the shape or the look of it. But all the other buttons on this unit do function really well, and we've got some extra special feature buttons here. Now this is going to be running Windows 11 out of the box, but you can also install SteamOS. They just posted a video showing it off. We've got a button that we can hold, and it basically turns the built-in controls into a mouse. We can tap it again, it'll bring up our on-screen keyboard, which makes it really easy to navigate the operating system. And it's also got a dedicated TDP button, so it's going to be running at 15 watts, but once we press the button, it'll bring it up to 28 watts, which really does increase the performance of the 6800U, but obviously it's going to decrease the battery life by quite a bit. I mean, going from 15 watts up to 28 does make a huge difference in battery life. But they will be offering a model with a larger battery known as the Pro. It also comes with more RAM. But when it comes to the basic specs, we've got that Ryzen 7 6800U, 8 cores, 16 threads, an absolutely amazing performing mobile APU. It's based on Zen 3 Plus. It's got a boost up to 4.7 GHz, and we've got the new Radeon 680M iGPU built in, up to 2200 MHz. This is based on RDNA2, and these are definitely some of the best integrated graphics that I've tested so far. So for the base model, you're going to get 16 GB of LPDDR5X RAM running at 6400 MHz, but you can opt for the Pro model with 32. It's got an 8-inch 1920 by 1200 IPS display, dual stereo speakers, a 3-axis gyro, RGB lighting right where the palm rests are. We've also got those analog triggers. You can opt for the 48 watt-hour battery version or the 65, but both of them do support 100 watt quick charging. It uses a 22 by 80 millimeter M.2 SSD. We've also got Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.2, and it will be running Windows 11 out of the box, but we can always install Linux on it, mainly SteamOS, basically the same operating system that's running on the Steam Deck right now. So obviously, the first thing people are going to compare this to is the Steam Deck, and for good reason. The Steam Deck is a great handheld at an amazing price, and AOKZOE just isn't going to be able to match that price. Valve can take a loss on the hardware because they're going to make it up and selling you games through Steam on the Steam Deck, and that's just the way it is with these handhelds right now. And I wanted to give you a quick size comparison here. I mean, they're very, very close. We do have a larger screen on the A1 coming in at 8 inches, and the A1 definitely isn't as wide, but one of the main things that people are going to be comparing is the performance of these two devices. So what I've done is run some benchmarks on the AOKZOE A1 and the Steam Deck. And first up, we've got Night Raid. Now remember, I'm running Windows 11 Pro on the Steam Deck, and it actually runs at about 16 watts, but we're just kind of listed at 15 here. On the AOKZOE at 15 watts, we got a total score of 16,749. The Steam Deck didn't fall far behind at all. It actually got a little better GPU score at 15 watts, but that 6800U did beat it out on the CPU side of things. But as we know, this 6800U can use a little more wattage to get those clocks up. And at 28 watts, the AOKZOE came in with a 21,572, and it beat out the GPU on that Steam Deck by about 6,500 points. Moving over to Firestrike, on the AOKZOE at 15 watts, 4751. The Steam Deck came in with a 4340, and at 28 watts on that AOKZOE, 6,127. And with this test at 15 watts, the AOKZOE did come ahead of the Steam Deck's GPU. And finally, we've got Time Spy. On the 6800U device at 15 watts, we got a 1,869, coming ahead of the Steam Deck's 1722, and at 28 watts, 2588. So at 15 watts on the 6800U versus the Steam Deck, I mean, they're very, very close the way they sit, but we can't add any more wattage to the Steam Deck, at least as making this video, so we're kind of right there where it's at. That's the performance you're going to get out of it, And I completely understand that the main complaint here is going to be battery life at 28 watts, And of course, you will get a lot less battery life at 28 watts, but you're going to get a really nice jump in performance when it comes to GPU and CPU performance. So battery life is going to be the trade-off we need to make, but keep in mind the A1 does support 100 watt quick charging, and we can charge up to 100% in about 1.5 hours with that charger. But now I want to move over to some gameplay and see how this thing really performs. So in the first video I made on the AOKZOE, I did test out a bunch of games. If you're interested in checking that out, link will be in the description. But here we have MK11, medium settings, 15 watts, and we get those dips under 60. At low settings, 15 watts, this will run at a constant 60 at 1200p. Or if you want to keep those medium settings, you can go ahead and take this up. We've got that turbo button. Now we're at 28 watts, 1920 by 1200 medium, and it'll run at a constant 60 all day long. Next up, we've got Doom Eternal, and this actually did really good. We're at 1280 by 800 with no dynamic resolution scale going. We can get an average of 51 FPS like this, or if you don't mind using dynamic resolution scale, even at 15 watts, we can take this up to high and run it at a constant 60. Now personally, I wouldn't mind playing it like this. If I didn't have that frame counter on, I wouldn't know we were dipping under 60. It feels good, but again, we can always take the wattage up on this. Same settings here. And now we can get an average of 82 FPS out of this one. And here's one that's always given me issues on these AMD APUs, be it a 3000, 4000, or even a 5000 series. Even the desktop variants are hard pressed to run this at 60 FPS. But right now we're at 1280 by 800, low settings, 15 watts, and it's so close. As you can see up in the top left hand corner with Afterburner, we're getting an average of 57 FPS. But at 28 watts, we can run this at medium settings, 1280 by 800, and get an average of around 73 FPS out of it. Really good performance here for an APU, especially a mobile APU. And finally here, we've got Jedi Fallen Order at 1280 by 800, medium settings, 15 watts. I also wanted to test out some original Xbox emulation using CXBX Reloaded. We've got DOA3 at 1080p, 15 watts, looking good here, we're at 60. Couple dips here and there, but nothing major. This is fully playable. And I know it's a little overkill running these games at 1440p, given the screen's resolution here, but I wanted to see if it would do it at 15 watts, and it definitely does. At 1080, you're going to pull around 12 watts with all this stuff. So when it comes to GameCube and Wii, you're definitely good to go on the A1. Checking out some WiiU emulation using the Cemu emulator. We're at 1080p with the Vulkan backend. This is Bayonetta 2, and we're set to 15 watts. It's running this game at full speed. Another one I tested was Breath of the Wild, and at 15 watts you can run that at 1080p, 30 FPS, but if you want to run it at 60 you will have to up the wattage. I found that around 23 watts will net you 60 FPS at 1080p with Breath of the Wild, but a lot of these games only require 15 watts to run at 1080p. And I was really impressed to see how well it ran at 15 watts. This is some pretty decent performance given the power we're pulling right now, but it does need a little bit more, and luckily we do have a turbo button built into this unit. So it's set up out of the box at 15, you press the button, it'll go up to 28 watts, and at 28 watts, it'll run this game at 60 FPS all day, and I'm pretty sure we don't need a full 28 watts to run this game. I'd say 23 watts, we'd be good to go on this, locked at 60. But with this turbo button, it's just set up to go straight to 28 watts, and as you can see, the game works really well. So I've had some time to test out the battery life on the AOKZOE, and keep in mind I have the smaller battery version. It's got that 45 watt-hour battery instead of 65. At 15 watts with the screen brightness set to 60%, God of War, 1 hour and 47 minutes. Dead Cells at 60 FPS, 3 hours and 46 minutes, and GameCube running at 720p, 4 hours and 23 minutes. So from the battery life I've got out of this versus the Steam Deck, I mean, they're right on par with each other at 15 watts with no extra tweaking. But with indie games and something like Dead Cells, I ran it at 60 FPS for this test. If you ran it at 30, it's not going to have to hit up that GPU and CPU as hard, and you could probably net another hour and a half of gameplay out of that game. And keep in mind, this handheld does support 100 watt quick charging, so you can recharge this battery up to 100% in about 1.5 hours. So the time I've spent with the AOKZOE so far has been really enjoyable. I love this big screen here. It's an 8-inch IPS, it's also 100% sRGB, and it's got a maximum brightness of 300 nits. It definitely looks really good. I'm glad they used full-size analog sticks here instead of the Switch-style sticks. Now, I've gotten used to using both, but I would prefer using these full-size, and I'm really glad we have them here. Lots of throw on those analog triggers around back, which is great for racing games, and that's something I've been playing a lot on this unit, especially something like Forza Horizon 5. It just runs amazingly on the 6800U. When it comes to the action buttons, we do have conductive pads. They feel perfectly fine, but the one thing that I'm not a huge fan of is the D-pad. Now, it does work. You can play your favorite fighting games with it. I personally just don't like the way it looks. I really wish they would have went with a traditional D-pad, or maybe even a swappable D-pad like they have on the Elite controllers. But there's no doubt that this is a powerful handheld when it comes to gaming and emulation, and especially if you take it up over that 15 watt, you just want a little more out of it, the 6800U really does liven up around 23 watts. But as we know, there's a lot of x86 handhelds on the market, coming to the market, being announced, being released, so in the end, it's really up to you. If you're interested in the AOKZOE, I'll leave a link to the Kickstarter and their website in the description. And the next video I post on this will have SteamOS 3 installed. I've actually got it set up on a separate SSD, but I wanted to get this out of the way first because there will be some people that just aren't interested in SteamOS, but I do think we'll see some really good performance out of the 6800U using SteamOS 3. So if there's any specific games you want to see running on SteamOS with the AOKZOE A1, let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.